Well, from the garden to the gardener, we're now joined in the studios by Robert Beyer. And Robert, it's a pleasure to have you on Central Texas Gardener. Thanks for sharing your garden with us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, we're going to be talking about variegated plants, which is a personal passion of yours. And I want to get started by learning about how that came to be. Variegation, when we say variegation, let's just let people know, what exactly do we mean? We have a little example of that right here.
Well, a variegated plant is any plant that has two or more colors, or one or more colors that are different from the natural color of the plant. Mm-hmm. And in other words, a variety in the color.
Okay, so just really foliage patterns and colors really is what we're talking about.
That's correct, that's right. A lot of people refer to variegation in terms of flowers, but we're talking strictly foliage.
Right, and I understand the passion for it. I think when I first started gardening, I really was fascinated by all the variations that could exist of a single plant, courtesy of variegation. It really adds some spice in the garden. And you like to use these plants in the garden because they really provide year-round interest, don't they?
Yes, they certainly do. In fact, of over 400 plants that I grow, 40% of them are variegated. Mm-hmm. So that's an indication of how much I really do like them. But I use variegated plants to add additional color to the garden because a lot of times I love blooming plants and flowers, but they have a finite period in which they're blooming, and then the rest of the year, what are you looking at? I want color in the garden year-round. And I try to incorporate variegated plants to add that different color, the different texture, and sort of paint a picture with it.
I bet that sometimes people come to your yard and are just confused by all the variegated foliage. You know, I mean, they're used to seeing green plants, and all of a sudden here's a garden filled with all these brightly colored leaves. That must be a little disorienting sometimes.
It's strange, Tom. A lot of people feel that their plants are sick if they see a variegated plant. That's not the case at all. I look at it in terms of providing striking contrast and color.
Right, right. Well, I want to let people know real briefly that you also have a passion for gardening that you share online too.
Yes, about over 15 years ago, I started a website. It started out as Houston and Gulf Coast Gardening, and when we moved to Austin 3 years ago, I immediately had to change that the name to, and I call it Southeast Texas Gardening because it now covers Central Texas as well.
Okay, Southeast Gardening info.
SoutheastTexasGardening.info.
Okay, very good, very good. Well, let's dive in and talk about some of these different plants that you brought. I was just holding up this little guy, and this is a form of Asiatic jasmine, which is very common, but you don't see this variant very often.
No, this is a new introduction. It's been out in just the past couple of years. It's called salsa. It has a real spicy color, combination of colors to it, predominantly yellow and green, and when the new growth comes out, it adds a vivid orange color as well.
Yeah, very attractive.
Can you imagine it as a ground cover underneath your solid green plants, what a color boost that gives to the garden?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is a good hardy plant, obviously. Asiatic jasmine
is
it certainly is a good ground cover and for sun or shade, really.
That's correct.
So that's a terrific thing. Now, what we have here is a plant called Dianella. It's also called flax flower.
Tasmanian flax.
Right. And it is there are several forms of this on the market. I have to say the only one I like is the variegated form. I really like this plant. Now tell us what kind of conditions this one grows in.
That plant, a lot of people thought that this would not be hardy in this area, but it's proven itself to be very hardy in the winter garden. This plant survived outdoors in my garden, and all I had to do is maybe trim off a little dead growth, and it's looking just fine again. It took the ice storm, it took everything. It's quite a nice evergreen addition to your garden that provides a very striking color as well.
And grows in the shade too, right?
Yes, it does. Very, very much so.
Yeah, and so when you get that bold striping in the shady situation, it really stands out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a great plant. Now, you have a lot of variegated citrus in your garden, don't you?
Yes, I do.
And this is a beautiful little, you brought this little cutting in. You can see it has variegated foliage, but also variegated fruit. And I don't know if our cameras are going to pick that up, but that's charming.
Yes, it is. Yellow streaked among the green on the fruit, and then when the fruit matures, it turns to just a solid orange. That's a variegated Calamundan orange.
Calamundan orange.
Calamundan orange, right. And it is cold hardy down to 25 degrees. During this winter, my plant has suffered no damage whatsoever, including ice and sub-freezing temperatures.
So you could grow it in a container and just shelter it if you need to, or in the ground in a sheltered location and cover it if you need to. Yeah. Well, it is a beautiful little plant. I have a variegated lemon that I'm really fond of
not only
in my
that,
garden.
you get the fragrance of citrus blossoms as well.
Yeah, there's nothing like that, right? Now, here's an old favorite from a lot of gardeners is Elaeagnus, which is a big, vigorous shrub that's used in a lot of different situations. And this tells a story about variegation too. This is an Elaeagnus, but there's a difference between this and the parent plant.
That's correct. Most people shy away from growing Elaeagnus because it grows so rampantly. It grows very fast, and it becomes a maintenance problem requiring constant pruning, where the variegated plants produce much less chlorophyll, therefore they are much slower growing. And this particular plant, for example, it's about 50% variegated, would grow at a much, much slower rate, and this particular shrub requires maybe once or twice a light trimming during the year, but it's very easy to maintain. Plus it adds beautiful evergreen color through the winter when most everything else is dormant.
And that's a really striking variegation. I think that's a beautiful example of kind of the art of variegation, if you will.
Yes. There are about 3 different variegations of, there are other variegated varieties of Elaeagnus, but this particular one is one of my favorites.
I always love the bloom fragrance of Elaeagnus too. It's one of my favorite flower scents. Now, there are variegated agaves, variegated yuccas, and this is a little agave, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, beautiful form.
Agave lopantha, and I've seen it under different names, variegata, quadricolor, called different things. But this particular plant started out, the species plant has a light green streak down the middle, and then all of a sudden one day somebody discovered a sport or mutation that occurred that had nice variegated margins, and this plant has been making the rounds among gardens.
Yeah, I have a form of Lophantha that is blue, which is really beautiful.
Oh, that must be nice. Yes, indeed.
This is with stripes as well, so blue and blue-green and kind of a gray-green. It's really attractive. One
thing that's nice about this is it stays nice and small, too.
Yeah, the other one does not. It is a monster. It will take over the garden. But this is a very attractive little plant here. Now, we have some images of some of the yuccas, which is another family that a lot of variegation work has been done in.
Oh, there's some beautiful variegated yuccas, especially the yuccas. I'm talking about some that aren't really full of spines and thorns, whatever. Yucca filamentosa, there's about 3 or 4 striking different variegated forms of that I've seen in the local nursery trade.
And you have a favorite form of that, don't you? Margaritaville, is that what I've heard?
That's Yucca rotundifolia.
Oh, rotundifolia.
Yeah, right. It's a different species, but yes, that is a favorite because it is just streaked with color. I mean, it just doesn't have one color pattern to it. It's just like somebody took a paintbrush and just painted down the leaf. It's really quite beautiful, yes.
Okay, and you were talking about the filamentosa. That's another group that been a lot of experimentation
That's another species. There's varieties called Bright Edge, Golden Sword, Old Gold.
Very popular, and I see them in a lot of gardening catalogs these days, and very, very attractive plants. And these are not the real stiff yuccas. These are
very
plants.
Flexible,
they're very flexible and easy to garden around as well. Well, it's easy to see why you're so passionate about these plants, and it's great that you're sharing your passion. And again, tell people about your website real briefly.
Okay, it's Southeast Texas Gardening. It's www.southeasttexasgardening, all one word, .info. And it's a completely public information, non-commercial type of site where I just try to share gardening tips and information with others.
Well, and we really do appreciate you coming on. I think this is the first time we've ever had in the history of this program a discussion just on variegated plants. So it's a lot of fun, something fresh and new for us, and we appreciate your enthusiasm for this topic and as well as coming on the show. And thanks again for sharing your garden with us. Okay, it's a real pleasure. Coming up next, it's Skip Richter.